Donald Trump is threatening to broker a deal over Ukraine, which should be very much to Russia's advantage and not to Ukraine's, which should be very worrying for Europeans. So I think if Donald Trump does become president and does do what he's saying he will do, then it will accelerate the need for exactly the sort of agreements we've seen today with Europeans, maybe Europeans spending more, but also spending more efficiently, which means cooperating a lot more, not duplicating what they're doing, having joint systems that can talk to each other, and accelerating the introduction of new technologies. We can learn an awful lot from the Ukrainians in that regard. They have transformed their defense industry in a remarkably short period of time, and we will need to do the same.
Britain and Germany have signed what the UK government is calling a landmark defence agreement aimed at boosting security, investment and jobs. Under the deal, German defence company Rheinmetall will open a new factory in the UK to manufacture barrels for artillery guns, supporting 400 jobs. Both countries will work together to develop drones and a new long-range missile, and German warplanes will begin patrol flights off the coast of Scotland. The Defence Secretary John Healey said the Trinity Agreement shows the government delivering on its promise to reset relations with Europe.
Just to give this a bigger context, our new government was elected in July to deliver change. Before the election, we promised a new defence agreement with Germany in 6 months. We've signed this landmark agreement in less than 4 months. This is what turning talk into action looks like. This is what resetting relations with Europe looks like. This is what growing our economy looks like. And this is what a NATO-first defence strategy looks like.
Well, let's speak to Malcolm Chalmers, Professor Malcolm Chalmers, Deputy Director General at the Royal United Services Institute. Hello, Malcolm.
Good evening, Carol.
Good to have you with us. How significant is this deal?
You know, I think the full significance of it remains to be seen, but it's certainly a pretty powerful indication of the direction that the new government wants to go. And we all know that the Labour government wants to reset relations with Europe, but given some of the restraints it's placed upon itself in relation to the customs union and single market, it's struggling a bit to find specific areas in which it can make progress. And it may well be that defence is one of them, not only in relation to the European Union, but in this case, of course, in relation to the most important defence partners that the UK has in Europe. The background of this, of course, is that the United States, which whoever wins the presidential election is likely to continue to have to shift the focus of its military capability more and more towards Asia to contain China, and that places more responsibilities on Europeans to get their act together to deter Russia, not by themselves, but taking on a greater share of that burden. And that's the background around which the UK and Germany are signing this agreement and intensifying their cooperation. There's some specific announcements in this agreement, but there are also a number of areas in which they're indicating they're going to move further over coming months.
And John Healey talked about it there as strengthening Britain's relationship with NATO. But is there any concern that you've got this pact with Germany? I think we have a separate one with France, and how all of that fits in with the overriding commitment to NATO?
Yes, it's a good question. We also have a special arrangement with the Joint Expeditionary Force with the Nordic and Baltic countries in the Netherlands. So there's a mosaic of what's sometimes called minilateral or bilateral.
And then there's the AUKUS pact involving Australia as well.
It's a complicated business. But one of the realities of NATO is as NATO has got bigger and taking in more and more member states, a very diverse range of member states, there was always a danger that if you decided everything at NATO level, then you ended up going at the pace of the slowest, which right now is Hungary and Turkey, which are really, Hungary in particular, out of sympathy with where most NATO countries are going. So you need to have NATO as a bedrock, but a whole range of other arrangements which are complementary to NATO. They're not trying to compete with NATO. UK, Germany's not trying to compete with NATO. It's trying to complement it, just as we have a special defense relationship also with the United States. These are complementary to each other, and I suspect in coming months this government in the UK will also be trying to do more on the UK-France bilateral relationships. I don't think that's a big danger. I think it becomes more sensitive if you're talking about the European Union defence relationship. But in terms of a bilateral relationship with Germany, which is just as committed to NATO as we are, I don't think that's a problem.
There have been concerns that Germany is wavering on its commitment to supporting Ukraine in the war with Russia. Is there a sense in which the UK will try to use this deal to try to firm up that commitment from Germany?
Well, I think Germany, together with the UK, we are the two biggest contributors of military aid to Ukraine, and indeed Germany probably spent a bit more than we do. The difference is that Germany is more reluctant, continues to be more reluctant to supply longer range missiles, or indeed to provide permissions to the Ukrainians to use them against Russian territory. So there clearly is a difference in that, and I think that will remain. But we are by volume, we're the two biggest contributors, and it's very important we contribute in that regard. And it may be that there can be a bit of a division of labour, that the UK can do some of the things which are maybe a little bit more risky than the Germans. The reality is, as NATO is evolving and will have to become less dependent on the United States, you can't have a credible European defence without the major European powers cooperating more closely together. The comfort blanket of relying on the United States is getting near the end of its life, and the United States, I think, will still have a presence here, but the United States is asking us to do more for ourselves, and that means cooperating with Germany, with France, as well as the exposed countries, and the most exposed countries in Eastern Europe, which are more forward-leaning, spending more than the countries to the west.
Just briefly, are you talking there about concerns that if Donald Trump gets another term in the White House, he will carry out those threats to withdraw some, at least, of the US role in NATO?
I think that trend is going to happen whoever's in the White House, but it could happen much more quickly under Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump is threatening to broker a deal over Ukraine, which should be very much to Russia's advantage and not to Ukraine's, which should be very worrying for Europeans. So I think if Donald Trump does become president and does do what he's saying he will do, then it will accelerate the need for exactly the sort of agreements we've seen today with Europeans, maybe Europeans spending more, but also spending more efficiently, which means cooperating a lot more, not duplicating what they're doing, having joint systems that can talk to each other, and accelerating the introduction of new technologies. We can learn an awful lot from the Ukrainians in that regard. They have transformed their defense industry in a remarkably short period of time, and we will need to do the same.
We'll have to leave it there, but really good to speak to you. Thank you so much, Malcolm Chalmers from the Royal United Services Institute.